Hi, I'm Shev. I'm vibing them because that's basically the clothes that I have in my wardrobe. And I'm going to be reading the section with Newt and the aliens and when he meets Anathema for the first time. Firstly, however, Newt had to do something about the flying saucer. It landed in the road ahead of him, just as he was trying to find the lower Tadfield turning, and had the map spread over the steering wheel. He had to brake hard. It looked like every cartoon of a flying saucer Newt had ever seen. As he stared over the top of his map, a door in the saucer slid aside with a satisfying whoosh, revealing a gleaming walkway which extended automatically down to the road. Brilliant blue light shone out, outlining 3 alien shapes. They walked down the ramp. At least 2 of them walked. The one that looked like a pepper pot just skidded down it and fell over at the bottom. The other 2 ignored its frantic beeping and walked over to the car quite slowly, in the worldwide approved manner of policemen already compiling the charge sheet in their heads. The tallest one, a yellow toad dressed in kitchen foil, rapped on Newt's window. He wound it down. The thing was wearing the kind of mirror-finished sunglasses that Newt always thought of as cool-hand Luke shades. "Morning, sir, or madam, or Newter," the thing said. "This your planet, is it?" The other alien, which was stubby and green, had wandered off into the woods by the side of the road. Out of the corner of his eye, Newt saw it kick a tree and then run a leaf through some complicated gadget on its belt. It didn't look very pleased. "Well, yes, I suppose so," he said. The toad stared thoughtfully at the skyline. "Had it long, have we, sir?" it said. Not personally. I mean, as a species, about 500,000 years, I think." The alien exchanged glances with its colleague. "Been letting the old acid rain build up, haven't we, sir?" it said. "Been letting ourselves go a bit with the old hydrocarbons, perhaps?" "I'm sorry?" "Could you tell me your planet's albedo, sir?" said the toad, still staring levelly at the horizon, as though it was doing something interesting. No." "Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you, sir, that your polar ice caps are below regulation size for a planet of this category, sir." "Oh dear," said Newt. He was wondering who he could tell about this, and realising that there was absolutely no one who would believe him. The toad bent closer. It seemed to be worried about something, insofar as Newt was any judge of the expressions of an alien race he'd never encountered before. "We'll overlook it on this occasion, sir." Newt gabbled. "Oh, I'll see to it. Well, when I say I mean, I think Antarctica or something belongs to every country or something, and the fact is, sir, that we have been asked to give you a message." "Oh?" "Message runs, we give you a message of universal peace and cosmic harmony and such like. Message ends," said the toad. "Oh!" Newt turned this over in his mind. "Oh, well, that's very kind." "Have you any idea why we have been asked to bring you this message, sir?" said the toad. Newt brightened. "Well, I suppose," he flailed, "what with mankind's harnessing of the atom and—" "Neither have we, sir." The toad stood up. "One of them phenomena, I expect. Well, we'd better be going." It shook its head vaguely, turned around and waddled back to the saucer without another word. Newt stuck his head out of the window. "Thank you." The small alien walked past the car. "CO2 level up 5%, it rasped, giving him a meaningful look. "You do know that you could find yourself charged with being a dominant species while under the influence of impulse-driven consumerism, don't you?" The 2 of them righted the 3rd alien, dragged it back up the ramp, and shut the door. Newt waited for a while, in case there was any spectacular light displays, but it just stood there. Eventually he drove up on the verge and round it. When he looked in his rearview mirror, it had gone. "I must be overdoing something," he thought guiltily, "but what? And I can't even tell Shadwell, because he'd probably bawl me out for not counting their nipples." "Anyway," said Adam, "you've got it all wrong about witches." The them was sitting on a field gate, watching dog rolling in cowpats. The little mongrel seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. "I've been reading about them," he said in a slightly louder voice. "Actually, They've been right all along. It's wrong to persecute them with British inquisitions and stuff. My mother said they were just intelligent women protesting in the only way open to them against the stifling injustices of a male-dominated social hierarchy, said Pepper. Pepper's mother lectured at Norton Polytechnic. During the day, in the evening she gave power tarot readings to nervous executives, because old habits died hard. Yes, but your mother's always saying things like that, said Adam after a while. Pepper nodded amiably. And, she said, at worst, they were just free-thinking worshippers of the progenerative principle. Who's the progenerative principle? Said Wensleydale. Dunno. Something to do with maypoles, I think, said Pepper vaguely. Well, I thought they worshipped the devil, said Brian, but without automatic condemnation. The them had an open mind on the subject of devil worship. The them had an open mind about everything. Anyway, the devil would be better than a stupid maypole. That's where you're wrong, said Adam. It's not the devil, it's another god or something, with horns. The devil, said Brian. No, said Adam patiently. People just got 'em mixed up. He's just got horns similar. He's called Pan. He's half a goat. Which half? Said Wensleydale. Adam thought about it. The bottom half, he said at length. Fancy you not knowing that. I should have thought everyone knew that. Goats haven't got a bottom half, said Wensleydale. They've got a front half and a back half, just like cows. They watched dogs some more, drumming their heels on the gate. It was too hot to think. Then Pepper said, If he's got goat legs, he shouldn't have horns. They belong to the front half. I didn't make him up, did I? Said Adam aggrieved. I was just telling you. It's news to me. I made him up. No need to go on at me. Anyway, said Pepper, this stupid pot can't go around complaining if people think he's the devil. Not with having horns on. People are bound to say, oh, here comes the devil. Dogs started to dig up a rabbit hole. Adam, who seemed to have a weight on his mind, took a deep breath. You don't have to be so literal about everything, he said. That's the trouble these days. Grass materialism. It's people like you go around chopping down rainforests and making holes in the ozone layer. There's a great big hole in the ozone layer because of grass materialism, people like you. I can't do anything about it, said Brian automatically. I'm still paying off on a stupid cucumber frame. It's in the magazine, said Adam. It takes millions of acres of rainforest to make one beef burger. And all this ozone is leaking away because of... he hesitated. People spraying the environment. And there's whales, said Wensleydale. We've got to save them. Adam looked blank. His plunder of New Aquarian's back issues hadn't included anything about whales. Its editors had assumed that the readers were all for saving whales in the same way they assumed they breathed and walked upright. There was this programme about them, explained Wensleydale. What have we got to save them for? Said Adam. He had confused visions of saving up whales until you had enough for a badge. Wensleydale paused and racked his memory. Because they can sing, and they've got big brains. There's hardly any of them left, and we don't need to kill them anyway, because they only make pet food and stuff. If they're so clever, said Brian slowly, what are they doing in the sea? Oh, I dunno, said Adam, looking thoughtful. Swimming around all day, just opening their mouths and eating stuff. Sounds pretty clever to me. A squeal of brakes and a long drawn-out crunch interrupted him. They scrambled off the gate and ran up the lane to the crossroads, where a small car lay on its roof at the end of a long skid mark. A little further down the road was a hole. It looked as though the car had tried to avoid it. As they looked at it, a small oriental-looking head darted out of sight. The them dragged the door open and pulled out the unconscious Newt. Visions of medals for heroic rescue thronged Adam's head. Practical considerations of first aid thronged around that of Wensleydale. We shouldn't move him, he said, because of broken bones. We ought to get someone. Adam cast around. There was a rooftop just visible in the trees down the road. It was Jasmine Cottage. And in Jasmine Cottage, Anathema Device was sitting in front of a table on which some bandages, aspirins, and assorted first aid items had been laid out for the past hour. Anathema looked at the clock. He'll be coming around any moment now, she thought. He wasn't what she'd been expecting. More precisely, he wasn't what she'd been hoping for. She had been hoping, rather self-consciously, for someone tall, dark and handsome. Newt was tall, but with a rolled-out, thin look. And while his hair was undoubtedly dark, it wasn't any sort of fashion accessory. It was just a lot of thin, black strands all growing together out of the top of his head. This was not Newt's fault. In his younger days he would go every couple of months to the barber's shop on the corner, clutching a photograph he had carefully torn from a magazine, which showed someone with an impressively cool haircut, grinning at the camera, and he would show the picture to the barber and ask to be made to look like that, please. And the barber, who knew his job, would take one look and give Newt the basic all-purpose short back and sides. After a year of this, Newt realised that he obviously didn't have the face that went with haircuts. The best Newt and Pulsifer could hope for, after a haircut, was shorter hair. It was the same with suits. The clothing hadn't been invented that would make him look suave and sophisticated and comfortable. These days, he had learned to be satisfied with anything that would keep the rain off and give him somewhere to keep his change. And he wasn't handsome, not even when he took off his glasses. Actually, less so when he took off his glasses, because then he tripped over things and wore bandages a lot. And she discovered when she took off his shoes to lay him on her bed, he wore odd socks. One blue one, with a hole in the heel, and one grey one, with holes around the toes. I suppose I'm meant to feel a wave of warm, tender female something or other about this, she thought. I just wish he'd washed them. So, tall, dark, but not handsome. She shrugged. OK, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. The figure on the bed began to stir, and Anathema, who in the very nature of things always looked to the future, suppressed her disappointment and said, "How are we feeling now?" Newt opened his eyes. He was lying in a bedroom, and it wasn't his. He knew this instantly because of the ceiling. His bedroom ceiling still had the model aircraft hanging from bits of cotton. He never got round to taking them down. This ceiling just had cracked plaster. Newt had never been in a woman's bedroom before, but he sensed that Newt had never been in a woman's bedroom before, but he sensed that this was one, largely by a combination of soft smells. There was a hint of talcum and lily of the valley, and no rank suggestion of old t-shirts that had forgotten what the inside of a tumbled dryer looked like. He tried to lift his head up, groaned, and let it sink back onto the pillow. Pink, he couldn't help noticing. "You banged your head on the steering wheel," said the voice that had roused him. "Nothing broken, though. What happened?" Newt opened his eyes again. "Car all right?" "Apparently." A little voice inside it keeps repeating, "Please to fasten sleep, Bert." "See," said Newt to an invisible audience. "They knew how to build them in those days. That plastic finish hardly takes a dent." He blinked at Anathema. "I swerved to avoid a Tibetan in the road," he said. "At least, I think I did. I think I've probably gone mad." The figure walked round into his line of sight. It had dark hair and red lips and green eyes, and it was almost certainly female. Newt tried not to stare. It said, "If you have, no one's going to notice." Then she smiled. "Do you know, I've never met a witch-finder before." Newt began. She held open his wallet. "I had to look inside," she said. Newt felt extremely embarrassed, a not unusual state of affairs. Shadwell had given him an official witch-finder's warrant card, which, among other things, charged all beadles, magistrates, bishops and bailiffs to give him free passage and as much dry kindling as he required. It was incredibly impressive, a masterpiece of calligraphy, and probably quite old. He'd forgotten about it. "It's really just a hobby," he said wretchedly. "I'm really He wasn't going to say wages clerk. Not here. Not now. Not to a girl like this. "A computer engineer." He lied. Want to be. In my heart, I'm a computer engineer. It's only the brain that's letting me down. "Excuse me, could I know—" "Anathema device," said Anathema. "I'm an occultist, but that's just a hobby. I'm really a witch." "Well done. You're half an hour late," she added, handing him a small sheet of cardboard. "So you'd better read this. It'll save a lot of time." Newt did in fact own a small home computer, despite his boyhood experiences. In fact, he'd owned several. You always knew which ones he owned. They were desktop equivalents of the wasabi. They were the ones which, for example, dropped to half price just after he'd bought them, or were launched in a blaze of publicity and disappeared into obscurity within a year, or only worked at all if you stuck them in a fridge, or if by some fluke they were basically good machines. Newt always got the few that were sold with the early bug-infested version of the operating system. But he persevered because he believed. Adam also had a small computer. He used it for playing games, but never for very long. He'd load a game, watch it intently for a few minutes, and then proceed to play it until the high score counter ran out of zeros. When the other them wondered about this strange skill, Adam professed mild amazement that everyone didn't play games like this. All you have to do is learn how to play it, and then it's just easy, he said. Quite a lot of the front parlour in Jasmine Cottage was taken up, Newt noticed with a sinking feeling, with piles of newspapers. Clippings were stuck around the walls, some of them had bits circled in red ink. He was mildly gratified to spot several he had cut out for Shadwell. Anathema owned very little in the way of furniture. The only thing she'd bothered to bring with her had been her clock, one of the family heirlooms. It wasn't a full-cased grandfather clock, but a wall clock, with a free-swinging pendulum that E.A. Poe would cheerfully have strapped someone under. Newt kept finding his eye drawn to it. "It was built by an ancestor of mine," said Anathema, putting the coffee cups down on the table. "Sir Joshua Device. You may have heard of him. He invented the little rocking thing that made it possible to build accurate clocks cheaply. They named it after him." "The Joshua?" said Newt guardedly. "The Device." In the last half hour Newt had heard some pretty unbelievable stuff, and was close to believing it, but you have to draw the line somewhere. "The Device is named after a real person," he said. "Oh yes, fine old Lancashire name. From the French, I believe. You'll be telling me next you've never heard of Sir Humphrey Gadget. Oh, now come on! Who devised a gadget that made it possible to pump out flooded mine shafts? Or Peter Gizmo? Or Cyrus T. Doodah, America's foremost black inventor? Thomas Edison said that the only other contemporary practical scientists he admired were Cyrus T. Doodah and Ella Reader Widget. And," she looked at Newt's blank expression, "I did my PhD on them," she said. "The people who invented things so simple and universally useful that everyone forgot that they'd ever actually needed to be invented. Sugar." You normally have two," said Anathema sweetly. Newt stared back at the card she'd handed him. She'd seemed to think it would explain everything. It didn't. It had a ruled line down the middle. On the left-hand side was a short piece of what seemed to be poetry in black ink. On the right-hand side, in red ink this time, were comments and annotations. The effect was as follows. 3819. When Orient's chariot, Japanese car? Inverted B, 4 wheels in the sky. Upturned, car smash. A man with bruises. Not serious injury, ? Be upon your bed. Take in. Aching his head for Willow Fine. Willow Fine equals aspirin. See figure 3757. A man who testeth with a pin. Pin equals witchfinder. See figure 102. Yet his heart be clean. Good witchfinder? ? Yet seed of mine own undoing. Refers to Pulsifer, see figure 002. Take the means of flame from him to make right certain. See, search for matches, etc. Together ye shall be, until the end that is to come. In the 1990s? Less than a day. See figure 712, 3803, 4004. Newt's hand went automatically to his pocket. His cigarette lighter had gone. "What's this mean?" he said hoarsely. "Have you ever heard of Agnes Nutter?" said Anathema. "No," said Newt, taking a desperate defence in sarcasm. "You're going to tell me she invented mad people, I suppose." "Another fine old Lancashire name," said Anathema coldly. "If you don't believe me, read up on the witch trials of the early 17th century. She was an ancestress of mine. As a matter of fact, one of your ancestresses. ancestors burned her alive, or tried to. Newt listened in fascinated horror to the story of Agnes Nutter's death. "Thou shalt not commit adultery, Pulsifer," he said when she'd finished. "That sort of name was quite common in those days," said Anathema. "Apparently there were 10 children, and they were a very religious family. There was covetousness Pulsifer, false witness Pulsifer." "I think I understand," said Newt. "Gosh, I thought Shadwell said he'd heard the name before. It must be in the army records. I suppose if I'd gone round being called adultery Pulsifer, I'd want to hurt as many people as possible. I think he just didn't like women very much." "Thanks for taking it so well," said Newt. "I mean, he must have been an ancestor. There aren't many Pulsifers." "Maybe that's why I sort of met up with the Witchfinder army. Could be fate," he said hopefully. She shook her head. "No," she said. "No such thing. Anyway, witch-finding isn't like it was in those days. I don't even think old Shadwell's ever done more than kick over Doris Stokes's dustbins." "Between you and me, Agnes was a bit of a difficult character," said Anathema vaguely. "She had no middle gears." Newt waved the bit of paper. "But what's it got to do with this?" he said. "She wrote it. Well, the original. It's number 3819 of the Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, first published 1655. Newt stared at the prophecy again. His mouth opened and shut. "She knew I'd crash my car," he said. "Yes. No. Probably not. It's hard to say. You see, Agnes was the worst prophet that's ever existed, because she was always right. That's why the book never sold."